On a rainy day in Korea, Choi stood at one side of the road with lunch for her son Seo-jin. Her son was studying in law school. He had forgotten to take his lunch before leaving. Seeing that her son was late in crossing the road, Choi decided to cross it herself. Just then, a biker appeared and tried to snatch the bag from Choi's hand. But when Choi didn't let go of the bag, the biker dragged her a long way across the road. Despite her desperate efforts, Choi refused to release the bag, so the biker stabbed her with a knife and fled. Seeing the crowd gathering, Seo-jin rushed over only to find his mother on the verge of death. Lifting her onto his shoulder, he carried her to the hospital, but Choi took her last breath on the way. All of Seo-jin's efforts were in vain. 7 years passed. Seo-jin is now a successful lawyer. He has fulfilled his mother's dream. He is dedicated to his work and never forgives the guilty. Though he's busy with various cases in court, he's still searching for his mother's killer. He believes the police were negligent in handling his mother's case. As he exits the court one day, he suddenly gets a call from his sister Seo-hee. In an excited voice, Seo-hee asks him to come home as quickly as possible, because their mother has returned. Seo-jin doesn't believe her. His sister already suffers from a mental illness, and she refuses to take her medication. She had left her husband's house after a fight and now lives here. Annoyed, Seo-jin returns home, and is utterly shocked. Their mother is sitting on the sofa. There is no sign of illness on her body. Seo-hee is overwhelmed with joy to have their mother back. Seo-jin asks, "Who are you?" Instead of replying, she calmly says, "Go change your clothes, I've prepared food." Seo-jin can't comprehend how someone who died 7 years ago is now sitting in front of him in perfect health. Neighbors gather to see her. No one can believe it. Everyone thanks God for this miraculous event. Amid all the questions, when someone asks her, "Why did you return after death?" she answers, "To take revenge." Suddenly, Choi lunges at Seo-jin with a knife to stab him, roaring like a wild animal, displaying inhuman strength. Everyone present manages to restrain her, and Choi immediately falls unconscious. Seo-hee calls the police to the scene, and Seo-jin comes under pressure. If the incident becomes public, it will create massive problems. What Seo-jin feared is exactly what happens. By evening, the authorities take strict action. This incident causes a stir among them. Choi is kept under treatment, and multiple tests are run on her. But all the results come back completely normal. A shocking revelation comes from the CIA in the USA. In recent years, some dead people have been returning, people who were denied justice or whose deaths were ignored in some way by the legal system. These dead individuals return to punish the real culprits, and once they've taken their revenge, they burn themselves to death. Recently in Macau, because the law failed to punish a murderer, 5 dead girls returned to life and killed the man who had once murdered them. 2 of those girls even revealed where their bodies had been buried. Those returning in this way to seek justice are called resurrected victims, or RVS. Choi's case is the first resurrected victim case in Korea. She had died in a motorbike incident in 2008, and exactly 7 years later, she has returned from death. Not only that, but upon return, she immediately attacked her own son. Resurrected victims only attack those responsible for their deaths. So naturally, suspicion falls on Seo-jin. Though the case is handed over to the NIS for investigation, a special officer from the U.S. Special Police Academy named Lee will lead the RV case. At this moment, there are 89 known resurrected victim cases worldwide. But none of the RVS survived after taking revenge, except Choi. NIS officer Sun has a good rapport with Seo-jin. So he promises to help Seo-jin as much as possible. But a question arises, why has Seo-jin kept his mother's case file with himself all this time? Seo-jin explains that he never had any faith in the police investigation. According to CCTV footage, the arrested suspect's DNA matched the DNA found under Choi's fingernails. However, one eyewitness claimed there were 2 culprits in this case, and the person the police arrested doesn't resemble either of them. That's why Seo-jin began investigating on his own. First, he searched for the bike, which had been bought using a fake ID card by a wanted Chinese-Korean criminal from Chinatown. Following that lead, he suspected someone and tried to have him arrested, but found out that his body had been discovered in the Han River 45 days earlier. His DNA matched the DNA from Choi's fingernails, and he was declared the killer. But Seo-jin reopened the case again, because the man who died didn't seem to have a Chinese accent in any of his statements. So Seo-jin collected a wanted list from Interpol, containing people who had gone from Korea to China in the last 7 years. While the case progressed in that direction, Officer Lee discovered something during his investigation. Choi had a $5,000 insurance policy, and Seo-jin was the beneficiary. So now, a new question arises, did Seo-jin murder his mother for the insurance money? So Officer Lee asked Seo-jin to submit every piece of insurance data, CCTV footage, eyewitness reports, and the phone call history of Choi on the day of her death. Meanwhile, Seo-jin is being haunted by nightmares. How could the same mother who was once overly possessive of him now return and try to kill him? Could he really have been at fault somehow? Seo-jin goes to see his mother. She is under 24-hour surveillance. Choi's condition is posing a serious challenge to science, because internally, her body behaves like that of a comatose patient, but externally, she appears to be perfectly normal. Such a phenomenon is impossible without some supernatural or divine force. If the truth about this incident and the resurrected victims becomes public knowledge, it could lead to chaos worldwide. Officer Sun adds that resurrected victims always target with precision. Therefore, the attack on Seo-jin must not be taken lightly. But Seo-jin insists that although his mother attacked him, she didn't actually hurt him at all. Which proves that the real killer is still hiding, and it's his responsibility to find them. At that moment, someone reported that the previous day, an unknown caller had inquired about Seo-jin, saying he wanted to reveal something about Choi. Seo-jin starts investigating the caller as well. Officer Lee meets with Seo-hee and takes several statements from her. It becomes clear that Choi loved Seo-jin even more than her daughter. She even worked extra jobs, including truck driving, to ensure her son never lacked anything. Her sacrifices for her son are beyond words. Meanwhile, Lee gets a call from the office, informing him that Seo-jin has gone to catch a Chinese criminal named Kim. Seo-jin had received intel that a man named Kim, who fled the country in 2008, recently returned to Korea using a fake passport. Following leads in Chinatown and paying locals for information, Seo-jin learns Kim's address. Disguising himself as a delivery boy, he tries to arrest Kim, only to discover that Kim has kidnapped a young girl. They plan a rescue mission. But as they save the girl, Kim attacks Seo-jin and escapes. Seo-jin chases him to the rooftop of an abandoned building, where he sees a little girl in a red dress standing at a distance. The girl looks at Seo-jin with a questioning gaze. As Seo-jin stares at her, Kim sneaks up from behind to strike him, but Officer Lee arrives just in time to save Seo-jin and arrests Kim. However, the girl has disappeared by then. Meanwhile, a special team is called in to examine Choi, a team that researches resurrected victims. According to their findings, the resurrected victim found in Macau once said the word nikma, a Hebrew word that translates to revenge. They've developed a special chemical for resurrected victims, which, when injected into their bodies, creates a high magnetic field, allowing them to regain consciousness temporarily. Since Choi is the first resurrected victim to survive even after attacking someone, they decide to inject the chemical into her, hoping it might reveal something. As the process begins, Choi starts answering every question. She confirms she has returned to avenge her death. She also says Seo-jin didn't kill her, but he is responsible for her death. The most shocking moment comes when she's asked, "Who sent you here?" Choi replies, "I sent myself, as a resurrected victim, to take revenge." This answer adds even more mystery to the case. Seo-jin then learns that one of the officers had tampered with Choi's DNA report 7 years ago, replacing it to falsely frame someone else for her murder. Meanwhile, when Officer Lee begins to interrogate Kim, he refuses to admit he was involved in any robbery or murder of a woman 7 years ago. Another piece of information comes to light during the investigation. Choi had another insurance policy. On the day a 9-year-old girl named Eun-jin and her father Hyun died in a car accident in Seojin's area, that man, Hyun, received the insurance payout from Choi's policy. Meanwhile, after getting permission from Lee, Seo-jin interrogates Kim, and another shocking piece of information comes to light. According to Kim, he once stabbed Choi and tried to flee with her bag, but the moment his knife fell, another person who was standing nearby picked it up and repeatedly stabbed Choi, ultimately killing her. At the same time, Officer Sun takes Kim from Officer Lee's custody and brings him under their jurisdiction, informing that they would send Kim to China, where the local law would sentence him to death. Officer Lee retrieves Choi's insurance details from the insurance department and finds that the day Eun-jin and her father Hyun died in a car accident, the insurance money was transferred to a man named Jinsu. What's surprising is that no one in Choi's family, not even her son, knew about this insurance policy. In the evening, Officer Lee learns that the researcher who submitted the DNA report from Choi's fingernail has left the country, and that a department officer was involved in tampering with the report to close Choi's case. But who was it? Meanwhile, Officer Sun had different plans. He did not send Kim to China. Instead, he brought him in front of Choi. The moment Choi saw Kim, a strange change came over her, and within seconds, Choi twisted Kim's neck and knocked him unconscious. To cover up the incident, department officers floated Kim's body down the river. On the other hand, Lee's investigation uncovers what happened 7 years ago. By digging into Seojin's call history, they find that on the same day that 9-year-old Eun-jin died in a car accident, her father Hyun had also died in a separate car accident, 4 kilometers away. Not just that, on that same night, Seojin returned home drunk from a club, and coincidentally, Choi transferred insurance money to a man named Jinsu. Which means, the entire incident took place on the same night. Officer Lee threatens to arrest Seo-hee, Seojin's sister, and interrogates her about what really happened that night 7 years ago. Meanwhile, an eyewitness to Choi's murder, just like Kim, also testified that someone else repeatedly stabbed Choi and then fled. According to that testimony, Seojin finds CCTV footage from a nearby alley, and what they see shocks everyone. Because the man in the footage is none other than Hyun, the father of the 9-year-old girl, who was supposed to have died in an accident on December 2, 2006. He had killed Choi to take revenge for his own death, and then walked into the next alley and burned himself to ashes. This means the person who killed Choi was also a resurrected victim, and somehow Choi was responsible for his death. This footage turns the entire case upside down. Meanwhile, Seojin discovers that the unknown person who called him that night was named Jinsu, a former officer of the local police station in Seojin's area. But in 2006, he suddenly resigned from the force. Now, both Officer Lee and Seojin have one target, and that is Jinsu. As Officer Lee reaches Jinsu's home, he's shocked, because Jinsu has taken his own life. Before dying, he left behind a note. Just then, Seojin also arrives at the scene, and seeing Jinsu's dead body, all his hopes are crushed. However, Jinsu's note reveals a huge secret. On December 2, 2006, at around 1 a.m. while patrolling, Jinsu saw a 9-year-old girl named Eun-jin sitting alone outside her house. Her father Hyun was inside, drunk, and he had beaten Eun-jin. Eun-jin begged Jinsu for help, but not wanting to get involved in trouble, Jinsu left her there and returned to the station. 1 hour later, Choi came to Hyun carrying a bag full of money, begging him to help save Seojin. Hyun agreed to keep things quiet, and the next day, reports came in that Eun-jin's body had been found by the roadside, killed in a hit-and-run. This means Choi came to Hyun that night to cover up the incident. Afraid of being exposed and thinking about his family, Jinsu resigned from his job. But everything changed after that. He started seeing the dead Eun-jin. She followed him everywhere, as if she wanted to kill him. Unable to take it anymore, Hyun decided to end his own life. But in his note, he pleaded that Seojin should never forgive himself, because so many lives were lost because of him. This revelation deeply shakes Seojin. So much had happened, and yet he knew nothing. How could this be possible? As Lee urges him to stay strong, Seojin declares that he will see this case through to the end, and if he turns out to be the guilty one, he will accept any punishment without hesitation. Meanwhile, Choi is taken to the edge of a forest, because her revenge is complete, and she could burst into flames at any moment. But what everyone expected didn't happen. Instead, using her powers, Choi shattered the headlights of every car there and vanished into the forest in an instant. After Jinsu's death, Seojin calls his sister and asks, what really happened with Mom on the night of December 2, 2006? As Seo-hee begins to recall the events, time rewinds to that cursed night. At that time, Seojin was studying at law college. On the night of December 2, after drinking heavily with friends at a club, he noticed a vegetable truck. The owner of that truck had once insulted Choi during a street argument. Although Seojin couldn't do anything back then, he had been holding that grudge ever since. As the memory plays back, Seojin suddenly sees Eun-jin inside a bus. He follows the bus in his car, and upon reaching a certain location, he gets into an accident due to being intoxicated. Barely surviving, Seojin gets out of the car, and, blinded by rage and alcohol, he drives a vegetable truck at high speed toward the bus. At that very moment, Eun-jin, trying to escape her father, runs into the street. Just then, Seojin's phone rings. It's a call from his mother. As he bends down to answer the phone lying under the seat, in his drunken state, he accidentally hits Eun-jin and drives away. Seojin never even realized what a grave mistake he had made. When he returned home, Choi saw blood on the front of the car. She immediately understood that something terrible had happened. To keep Eun-jin's mouth shut, she told her daughter to stay silent and left that very night, taking the car. As Choi approached the tunnel, her eyes caught sight of Eun-jin lying there, covered in blood. As she went to check whether there was still life in her body, Eun-jin's father, Hyun, arrived. Hyun assumed the accident had happened because of Choi's negligence. When Choi tried to flee, Hyun chased after her. After a long chase, at one point, Choi swerved to the side, and the car crashed straight into a wall. Hyun died on the spot. To prevent the blame for this sudden accident from falling on her son and to save his career, Choi decided to cover up the incident. She took the insurance money and went to the local police station to meet Jinsu and pleaded with him to save her son. Although Seo-jin didn't remember anything from the previous night when he woke up in the morning, Choi was drowning in guilt from her actions. However, fate had something cruel in store. Seo-jin's car overturned at the exact same place where Eun-jin had died. Suddenly, in the rain, Seo-jin saw Eun-jin walking toward him. Eun-jin asked, "Why didn't you come forward even once to help me that night? I could have survived if you wanted to save me." By that time, oil had already spread from a drum lying nearby. Eun-jin was ready with a matchstick. Just then, Choi arrived and stood in her path. She fell at Eun-jin's feet, begging for her son's life. Even in death, her motherly instincts hadn't faded. Most importantly, she had come back not as someone seeking vengeance for her own death, but as a resurrected victim, to save her son from Eun-jin's wrath. Choi said, "Seo-jin did nothing wrong that day. I'm the one to blame for everything. If punishment is needed, let it be given to me. But I don't want even a scratch on my son. If needed, I'm ready to give my life 1,000 times over for him." Seo-jin hugged his mother. His mother had suffered so much for him since his childhood. She had never thought of herself. Everything he had achieved was only because of his mother. So, in that moment, he was ready to give his life for her, and he believed he deserved to. He had only one request, that his mother forgive him. Suddenly, a truck came hurtling toward them like a storm. To atone for all his sins and free his mother from her pain, Seo-jin walked in front of the truck. Seeing Seo-jin walking toward death, Eun-jin began to burn slowly. For one last time, Choi hugged Eun-jin, begging for her son's life. At that moment, the spilled oil caught fire, and a terrible accident occurred. But unexpectedly, the truck passed by Seo-jin without hitting him. It felt as if some supernatural force had pulled him back from death, whispering, "Not today." With wide, stunned eyes, Seo-jin saw both Eun-jin and his mother burning in the raging flames. But on his mother's face was a strange, peaceful smile, because Eun-jin had forgiven her. Even death itself had been defeated by a mother's love. Just like she had always protected him through every hardship since childhood, she did the same even after death. After this incident, Seo-jin didn't forget to repay his mother's sacrifice. Because his mother had always taught him to walk the path of truth. So, he confessed his guilt in open court and requested the harshest possible punishment. Seo-jin refused to appeal during his trial. A mother who could go to such lengths for her son, sacrificing all her own happiness and sorrow, Seo-jin would gladly be born 1,000 times over just to repay her. And this is what you call the perfect judgment. Let us know in the comments how you liked today's story. Your feedback inspires us to bring more beautiful and engaging story recaps.